Good evening and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Tonight is a special post-game recap edition of the Steelers' Week 15 win over the Cincinnati Bengals, completing the season sweep and moving to the brink of winning the AFC North Division title with a 24-20 win. It is about 9:30 here. I'm broadcasting in Geneseo tonight. Austin is not with me right now as he is studying for his last final at Stony Brook for the semester. I probably could have done this a little while ago. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do something like this, so I still don't know if I'm going to actually post this or not, but I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit and get my thoughts out there about this game and a little bit about the Steelers season. So as I said, the Steelers won 24-20 over the 5-8-1 Bengals, who were actually eliminated from playoff contention officially when the Ravens beat the Eagles with about 2 to 3 minutes left in this game. The Steelers improved to 9-5, and their win streak is now at 5 games in a row, looking ahead to that Christmas Day matchup against the Ravens. This game really felt like it was going to be another one of those games where the Steelers just struggle to do anything right against a sub-500 team on the road. The first drive of the game, it looked like the Steelers were going to get a 3-and-out, but then a face mask call and Stephon Tuitt gave the Bengals a first down. And on that same play, Tuitt actually ended up hurting himself, and he missed the rest of the game, so his status for next week is in doubt, so we'll definitely keep an eye on that. The Bengals really dominated the first half from there on out. The score was 20 to 9 at halftime. The Steelers were moving the ball a little bit, but they couldn't get anything sustained, and on defense it really felt like the Bengals were just doing almost as they pleased. Most of it was just simple time of possession. The Bengals were just constantly picking up first downs, and the Steelers weren't connecting for anything on for long periods of time in the first half. It was a lot of frustration, as I mentioned. The first penalty, there was a second penalty on Artie Burns in the end zone, a pass interference that led to the second touchdown for the Bengals. And it really seemed like this was going to be the kind of game that the Steelers just always seemed to lose. But it all seemed to change after Jeremy Hill scored a 4-yard touchdown run in the second quarter to put the Bengals up. I think it was 17-3. I'm not one for superstition, but it's kind of funny. We were talking about the terrible towel and how it seems like whenever someone on a different team or a fan base or something like that, whenever they disrespect it or they taunt the Steelers with it or they do something like Jeremy Hill was doing today where he tried to rip it and then ended up throwing it on the ground, ended up coming back to bite them. And it's strange that that's where the game seemed to change, because from that point out the Steelers ended up outscoring the Bengals. I think it was 21-3. That's correct, yeah. So it was definitely, I don't know if it really played a real factor in the game, but I know the Steelers players were talking about it in the locker room afterwards when I was listening to the Steelers post-game coverage. So just thinking about some players in this game, Chris Boswell is definitely the first person you have to talk about, tying a team record with 6 field goals today. Obviously, the team's leading scorer. None of his 6 field goals were really chip shots either. I mean, he had 3 of his field goals were from 49 yards. That's very tough right there alone. Then he added a 45-yarder, a 40-yarder, and a 30-yarder. So I guess the 30-yarder is probably the closest thing to a chip shot you could have. But the conditions in Cincinnati today were definitely not up to par with what it would have been a few weeks ago. It was not. It was windy. It was windy and cold. It was definitely tough to kick. And Boswell, he didn't make them. They weren't all pretty in the sense that they weren't all right down the middle and they all weren't hitting the back of the net. But he got it done when he needed to, when he was called upon. And that ties a team record with Jeff Reed, who tied Gary Anderson too, back in 2002 and 1988 respectively, with 6 field goals made for the franchise record. So definitely he is the number one star of the game. for the Steelers. Looking elsewhere, I don't want to give a single player, maybe, I'll give Lawrence Timmons, I guess, the spotlight player on defense for Pittsburgh today. He showed up big on a few goal line plays, and he ended up having the interception in the second half that really signaled the change of momentum that made everyone kind of sit back and say, all right, the Steelers they're the team that has the momentum now. They're the team that they're not playing on their heels anymore. They're the team that's attacking. It felt like he's really had a good bounce back season after last year struggling and being a little inconsistent. He's definitely someone that may not be what he was a few years ago, but he's still a quality football player, and he's a good player to have. I also wanted to spotlight the defensive line. As I mentioned, Stephon Tuitt missed almost the entire game, and Ricardo Matthews got injured too. So that means Daniel McCullers, Javon Hargrave, and who was it? LJ Ford, I believe, were the only three healthy defensive linemen the Steelers had. And this was after the first half where the Bengals had been just gashing the Steelers on the ground, and Brandon LaFell was playing well early too. It really felt like they were, it was going to be another one of those games where the Steelers just couldn't stop the run. But things changed in the second half. Jeremy Hill, -1 yards in the second half. Rex Burkhead finished with 7 for 32 and Hill with 20 for 43. Definitely a great second half performance by the Steelers defense there. Only 157 passing yards on top of that interception for Dalton. It felt like he wasn't playing poor per se, although the stats bear it out, but like he just wasn't doing anything amazing, I guess. Another stat that's interesting was the time of possession in the first half, where the Steelers controlled the time of possession in Buffalo last week. It was kind of the opposite this week, where the Bengals had the ball for almost the entire first half, yet the Steelers ended up winning the entire total possession battle of 32 minutes to 28. I think it's really indicative of just the way the Steelers were playing in the second half. They weren't amazing at all, but they were just doing enough as far as what it takes to win. They finished with 382 total yards and definitely could have scored a lot more points. It was really frustrating to see all the times that they were beating themselves with penalties on drives that ended up in only field goals, and they were lucky Boswell was able to bail them out. Those penalties certainly could have come back to haunt them. But if you looked at the stats, you'd say the Steelers should have won by a lot more, but it was still a sloppy game. Roethlisberger was overthrowing some of his targets, even though he finished with 286 yards, a touchdown. And how about no interceptions for him? I will say that it feels like I think he's thrown an interception like the last 3 to 5 games against the Bengals. So that's definitely a big victory. Le'Veon Bell was held in check mostly. We both predicted Bell would have a huge game, and he only had 93 yards on 23 carries, most of that coming in the second half, and he finished with 5 catches for 38 yards. The Bengals definitely game planned to keep him from putting up the numbers he put up last week, but and also you look at Antonio Brown, only 3 catches for 58 yards. It was definitely a game where the other contributing receivers came up big this time, something which we had been talking about all season. They finally had a pretty big game, namely Eli Rogers, who had 5 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown. That was something along the lines of what I predicted. Maybe not those specific numbers, but I think I said he'd have a touchdown, and that touchdown where the Steelers finally broke through, that was a fantastic throw by Roethlisberger. And a great catch by Rodgers, and also Ladarius Green had 5 himself for 72 yards, and including a big catch on a 3rd and 17 on the Steelers' final drive, where they got possession of the ball with 5 minutes left and were able to end up running out the clock. He ended up getting hurt on the play and is now in concussion protocol. He would be a huge loss for this Christmas Day game against the Ravens, but you look at other guys like Kobe Hamilton, who had a huge 21-yard catch on a third down, David Johnson, who had a 12-yard catch on a third down, and even Sammy Coates got into the mixes. He was finally a part of the offense again, coming up with his first catch since week 5. It was great to see him back in the lineup and actually doing things. So maybe that will provide some hope going forward. But looking at this game on the whole, it's definitely not the cleanest game the Steelers have played. It's not a pretty game. And there were times it looked like the Steelers were going to play or were going to just simply roll over and just lose this game like they have so many other games on the road against sub-500 teams. Even think about like the Baltimore Ravens or Philadelphia Eagles game from earlier in the year. It felt a lot like that game early on, but I think this game taught us everything about what this team has become and what it's fought for over the past month and a half. Well, not month and a half, but a little over a month now. This team has changed. As I said back when the Steelers lost to Dallas, that game had the potential to be a season-altering loss. And we've seen now the Steelers have won 5 straight, and they haven't always been great doing it, but there have been times when they've been able to throw the ball, run the ball, and play good defense all around. It's been great to see, and this kind of a win proves to me, and it should prove to everyone else, that they finally turned the corner. When they aren't having their best day, they can still beat teams, and they can still be good when they need to be. It was definitely a quality win, and I was definitely proud to see that team play the way that they did, even when they weren't at their best. I don't think I have anything else to add at this point, so I'm going to sign off for today. Thank you for joining me today, and Austin and I hope to be back, maybe not tomorrow being Monday, but we're hoping Tuesday with a full recap of the game. So thank you for joining me today. My name is John Kier, broadcasting from Geneseo, New York today. You are more than welcome to email the show at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Facebook. Our Facebook and Twitter handles are STS Podcast 1, and we're just Stronger Than Steel Podcast on SoundCloud and YouTube. Thank you for joining me here today. Everybody have a good night.